We're back with Season 1, Episode 4, Long in the Tooth. This is the episode in which we go after Captain Harriman as he is running from the mob. And Raylan has to try and get to him before the mob does. Some shenanigans ensue. There's some racism just kind of tossed all over the place there. And that's the episode in a nutshell. This is a... God, I don't even know where to start with this, and this is a weird one. Oh, I should probably set the announcement now. We don't really have like a formal announcement for Streaminations since they're just kind of scheduled, but I'll toss out a thing really quick here. There we go. Now we're going to leave Discord so it doesn't interrupt us. This is a weird one to go through. So, the first thing I see on my screen is Alan Ruck. Now, Alan Ruck is one of those weird actors that I've only ever really seen do a couple of things. But he was good every single time I saw him. Obviously, being the Trek guy that I am, I would be remiss if I did not mention Star Trek VII. But also, he did some stuff for... I don't remember which fan project I covered, which Star Trek fan project, but he also played a captain there and did a really good job of it, actually. And of course, he's here, and that makes 3 total. I'm sure he's in other stuff, but he's really good here. And then we see Brandon Keener. That one... You know, what's funny is I'm pretty sure Keener's been in a few things over the years. Because he does some television stuff. Like, he bounces around, usually only in one episode. There's actually an official term for that. I can't remember it right now. It's someone whose primary career is to play one-offs. And they're known for that. Like, it's in their file, so to speak. So if you need someone to play a guest star or a speaking role, a moderate speaking role into something... You call him that thing, right? It's like, okay, you, done. And that's kind of Keener's thing. He's done that, which I find hysterical, because in the off chance the name Brandon Keener doesn't sound familiar, he played freaking Garrus over in Mass Effect. Actually, yeah, Shadow Machine. There's actually several actors that I've covered across my career who are that, the permanent guest star is a good way to put that, Jesse Ward. Just someone who rotates in and out. And it's usually only just for one episode. Like, you look at his stuff here. Like, he's in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for one episode. He's in NCIS Los Angeles for one episode. He's in Castle for one episode. He's in Justified for one episode. He's in Buffy, one episode. You get it. What's funny is I think at this point, probably at least partially because of his role as Garrus, he's done more video game voice acting than he has actually been in television. He still does television stuff. His most recent stuff was just 2 years ago for a show called 911 Lone Star. But, can I recommend Buffy? Moving on. So I see Garrus, and what's really funny to me is if you've ever seen Garrus in... no, Brad Dourif is a little bit different. Brad Dourif is the... Oh, how do I explain that? So, people like Brad Dourif are like one step above what I'm talking about, but at the same time fill the same slot. What I mean by that is, you call on someone like Brandon Keener when you need a random guest star. You call on someone like Brad Dourif when you need someone who is a very specific type of guest star. Does that make sense? It's like back when I was working in IT, we had Tier 2 and Tier 3. Tier 3 wasn't higher than Tier 2. Tier 3 was more specialized than Tier 2, right? So that's someone like Brad Dourif. He is really good at being absolutely terrifying, and so that's who you call for stuff like that. It's why they pulled him in Voyager and in Babylon 5. By the way, funny little side note, Brad Dourif is also really, really good at playing a kind, innocent, nice person. But he's really, really good at being horrifically evil. And yeah, Ron Perlman's actually another good example of someone who's got that Tier 3 type thing going on. Or, let's see, what's another good example? Of course, I can't think of anything right now. Ironically, Dwight Schultz was another example of the permanent guest star thing. That's why they brought him in for Barkley over in TNG. And he did so well because he's Dwight freaking Schultz that they just kept having to bring Barkley back. Hey, Epic, you do understand correctly. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to jot it down later because I don't want to lose my trend, but thank you for putting it in the comments so I can check it later. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting a little off topic, but that's the kind of thing that Brandon Keener tends to do, or at least tended to do. I should use a little bit of past tense here. But Alan Ruck, what I like most about his portrayal in this episode is there's a point in the episode, it's not that far in, I actually wrote down here, that he's either a complete scumbag or he's extremely on the level. And I wanted to give credit to Ruck, the actor playing Roland, that I wasn't sure which it was that early on. Now, by the episode's end, I think we have a definitive answer, but at the beginning, you don't know which way he's going to jump. And it's fascinating, and it's all down to how he acts, because he gives little hints and inferences that could go either way, which is harder to do than it sounds. So huge props to Ruck. And then he plays hardball on Garrus. It just decides to take the gold back. And I've got to be honest. Let's just... Okay, so this episode is a good episode. Let's get that out of the way. But this is probably the worst part of the whole episode. Oh, not because someone who was a jackass was having his teeth being ripped out. That was awesome. And it probably says something about me that I was rooting for the guy who's ripping out the other guy's teeth. But it's the biggest plot hole in the entire episode. It's what we call an inciting event. Now, I know. The argument here is and always will be, people do really dumb things in real life. It's realistic, yada, yada, yada. But the thing here is, this guy is consistently portrayed as being very on the ball, very competent, multiple steps ahead of basically everyone else around him. And he's not an idiot. And he decides to go and assault this guy, threaten to kill him, and assault this guy. Did you notice the guy still had his phone out when he started it? So he was still on the phone when he started this assault. And then decided to go ahead and do this whole thing. And I know. It's realistic. But I don't think that makes it good writing. I know that's the argument that I hear so often. Well, it's realistic. Realism is not a defense when it comes to writing. And I've had that feeling for many, many years. Now, I will admit, obviously, Keener was being a jackass here. But there was one other little problem. See, here's the thing. It's mentioned much later in the episode that the way that this whole system worked, I shouldn't say it mentioned, they don't actually say it outright. They never say it outright. But the way his whole system worked was he built people in order to be able to pay the bills so that he could then not charge other people. Now, what's interesting is there's an official term for that, and of course I can't think of it right now. I couldn't think of it when I was doing my notes either. But there's a specific economic term for that. It's very carefully, Lord Hermont. You write Lord Malik from KOTOR 1. It's when you specifically overcharge some people so that you can afford to undercharge other people. It's usually portrayed in a positive light, this kind of a thing. Because the idea is usually that the people being overcharged usually know they're being overcharged, or are even overgiving, like overpaying, specifically to cover the other people, right? So that's a thing. Hello, Venters. Thank you very much. I'll jot that down later. Always appreciate those supports. And that's clearly the method that Roland was using in order to keep his operation afloat. So I could kind of see the logic here of losing one of his overpays. Well, that's different, Lord Harriman. But of course, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, so I'm going to completely ignore that question because it's going to derail me hard. And I'm going to go back to what I was talking about. Nope, I'm already derailed. All right, so how do you write? Yes, I did, Zactef. It's already been reallocated, actually. I think. I don't know. I don't know. The website's up to date. Go check the website. So, getting really off topic today. So now that I'm completely off topic, I was going to go into the whole economic principle and human kindness and all that fun stuff. But the bottom line is, it makes sense that he would go after this guy out of anger or out of frustration because he was losing him as a customer. But that's not really what he did. Instead, he just decided to go after the guy and go all mafia on him. And that's off. I don't have a better way to explain it. It literally feels like something that has been written for someone else. And that's what I'm going to say about that. I'm just going to move on because we can argue this back and forth and it doesn't matter. It's a ding about the episode, negative to story. Moving on. Because the entire rest of the episode I have almost no complaints. Emphasis on almost. But now that I've actually concluded that thought, I'm going to go and address Lord Harriman's thing. So how do you write a smart character making a mistake? Because that's what that is. You say it, a smart person doing something dumb. But a smart person making a mistake, there's a lot of ways to do that. The easiest, I think, is the way I'm going to stress that. Way to do that is to have the smart person just look at the clues that exist and make the wrong call, right? To do something wrong. I actually have an example of that now that I've had a few seconds to think about it. The Thrawn trilogy. Now, the Thrawn trilogy is, and I'm going to get everybody upset at me here for just a second, not that good. Go ahead. Go ahead. But I mean that. I'm not just trying to be a dick here. Because I mean that with total sincerity. The Thrawn trilogy is not that great. It is, however, still good. It's not, everyone holds it up as like the shining example of glorious awesomeness. But I went back and reanalyzed that work semi-recently. And while I love Timothy Zahn to death, you can tell that was early on in his career. He is a much better writer now. But I'm getting off topic. The thing is, he has Thrawn look at the situation. God, I hate the Bane trilogy. He looks at the situation and he says, and he comes up with a very logical, reasonable, and arguably what could have been correct deduction from the situation. He is wrong, of course, but that's the overall point. Thrawn made a mistake, not because he was an idiot, not because he was out of character, but because he made a mistake. No, I know Imperial Star Destroyer. Everybody loves the Bane trilogy. I know I'm the weirdo there. It's okay. I can accept that. So that's how you do a smart character making a mistake. That's one of the ways. Excuse me. That's one of the ways you can do that. Another way you can do it, you can completely overwhelm the character. I've actually seen several works of fiction do this before. Because, no, exactly, Imperial Star Destroyer. I'm actually really happy that a lot of people love the Bane trilogy. It's going to be an interesting conversation when it comes to the Star Wars rewrite. I'll tell you that much. Because I can't just eject stuff from the rewrite because I don't like it. But at the same time, I know a lot of people are going to argue to eject stuff from Star Wars because they don't like it. So like I said, it's going to be an interesting topic, interesting discussion. But anyways, I'm not off topic again. I swear we're going to talk about Justified. Hi, I'm the Lore Runner. If you have never seen me discuss a show, we just kind of discuss things that are related to the show. Smart people making a mistake. You can completely overwhelm them. You can have them have so much information and so many different perspectives, and they're having trouble keeping up. And then there's a moment. I've actually talked about in the moment a lot. Now, it's actually harder to write in the moment than it sounds. Especially, which is hysterical, considering we all probably know what it feels like to be in the moment, right? Because you're not, and I mean this with actual sincerity, you're chemically not quite yourself when you're in the moment. You're literally biologically, your brain isn't functioning quite correctly because of a lot of stuff that I'm not going to go into. So in the moment, we can do some stupid things. But I hate to point this out, that doesn't actually apply here. So, for example, maybe he was really at the end of his rope, like Lord Harriman suggests. Maybe he was struggling with rent and he was just barely solvent, and losing even one person was just, that's too much. But the problem is, the thing about them being in the moment is it's called a moment for a reason. Once the moment passes, your brain kicks back in. Lots of people, and I'll raise my hand on this. I hope none of you understand this, but some of you probably do understand what it's like to do something in the moment and immediately regret it. Right? And that's the thing. This isn't in the moment. It would have worked in the moment, however, and Lord Harriman actually has a really good suggestion here. It would have worked in the moment if they had gotten the guy under the thing, and he started messing with him, and the guy was threatening to get out, and he's like, no, I'm in the middle of this. And the guy's like, well, if you don't actually get this paid, I got to do this because I can't do out of pocket. And the argument escalated, and then and he rips out the tooth. That would have actually worked better. It would have taken massaging to make the sequencing work better, to make the dialogue work better. But that would then make this whole sequence make so much more sense. He's a smart guy who's on top of things, who loses himself in the moment. And the moment passes, Alan Ruck could totally do this, by the way, because he's a great actor. He could just have been like, oh God, what have I done? What have I done? Oh God. And he realizes how much he has screwed up and immediately starts freaking out. And is like, okay, backup plan here. And that leads to the rest of the events of the episode, right? Him going out with a carefully calculated vial and aiming it right at the guy's neck, and then having the tweezers on him, and then forcing him to lay down, and then there's so many opportunities there for his brain to kick in and say this is a bad idea, and it doesn't. That's the problem I have with it right there. Okay, we're past the 30-second mark. Slight exaggeration. So we start off, and Roland, so Roland is the guy who references the cartel almost immediately. So we already have some stuff there. But then we also have our first major character dynamic, because Roland recognizes Raylan instantly. That's a good question, Imperial Star Destroyer. I would say no, based on the events of the rest of the episode. That's my take on that. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We have a bit of exposition. Not the best I've ever seen, but speaking from personal experience, I know exactly what it's like to have a friend who is overeager to share an embarrassing story about you. I'm sure most of you probably know that too. Yeah, he does recognize the hat. Okay, fair enough. It's starting to be a thing. 2013 or 2017, I forget which tracks here. Relatively recently. Or maybe it's 2007. It's relatively recent in terms of the timeline. It's set in modern day. But anyways, I'm going to skip forward a couple of things here. Alan Ruck is amazing in his role. The way that he's trying to talk around, what was her name, Mindy, while at the same time just trying to be on the level with her, but then not, but then okay. And like, there's this one moment where she's asking about what's going on, and they're in the middle of like a convenience store. And he doesn't say it, but you can see on Alan Ruck's face, is this really the time for this? Is this really the place for this? Like, there's just this exasperation of just... And he even looks around for a second like... Okay, then he walks over, nice and close, so that nobody can overhear them. Okay, here, I'm gonna level with you. And I mentioned I only had that one complaint about the episode. That's actually not quite a lie. Mindy is not that... The woman who plays Mindy is not that great of an actress. No offense to her, it's just she doesn't really do much with the role. I know she's supposed to be stupid, but the weird thing is that's one of those informed traits. At no point does the actress actually portray herself as stupid. Instead, we are told repeatedly that she's stupid, and I'm just kind of like, okay, that's an odd character trait to have, but whatever. She has a couple of good moments. I don't want to come down too hard on her, but it's weird seeing an actress who is that middling alongside Alan Ruck, who is nailing it, you know? Moving on. So, then we get to the part where he's gonna like, no, it's my car. Oh yeah? What's your license plate? I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I really like the old vet. He has a perfect blend of cantankerous without actually being irritating. And let me tell you, that is a hard balance to hit. Because by default, cantankerous tends to be irritating, right? And so actually managing to be as amusing as that guy, tons of props. The guy plays it perfectly. Just, yep. What? And there's this funny little tidbit, and I just want to mention it really quick, because there's lots of little moments of characterization in this episode, and something I'll be talking about later. But I want to mention it now in case I forget to. There's a moment where Roland says to the vet, Thank you for your service to the country. The guy says, yeah, I lost a leg to diabetes, but you're welcome. And that seems like such a simple little thing, but it's a big and it's one of those quiet moments that actually informs the entire rest of the episode. I'll talk about why in a minute. Don't let me forget. So, they continue this game. Wow, everything's a game. I've said that before. Everything's a game. Sometimes I'll be cooking, and you know, like something goes wrong on the stove, and I'll be like, game. Don't look at me that way. So, one of the things that I continue to enjoy about this show is the fact that it continues to treat me like I'm older than 5. It's little stuff, tiny stuff, but I appreciate it all the same. There's this moment where... pass the toast. There's this moment where he's asking the neighbor, you know, have you ever called her? And she's like, yeah, why? And they don't explain it. And that's such a little thing, but I bet every one of you can picture that scene in a huge number of other fictional works, especially movies and shows, but also video games, where there'd have to be a line of dialogue that some asshole executive insisted that was there just to make sure that the 5-year-olds in the audience picked up on it, saying, well, if you've called her before, then we can then get her number. And as a consequence, we should be able to maybe get her... And just explain the obvious, right? You don't need to explain that, and they don't. Okay, me too, Jesse Ward, but you get my point. You get my point. It's like, I appreciate that the show doesn't treat me... Yeah, like, honestly, Persona. We came up with a brand new term when we were reviewing Persona 5. It's called empty text, and that's what that really is. It's a subcategory of empty text, but it is empty text. It does not need to be there. It's empty calories. Get rid of it. Slice that stuff. Edit that stuff out of your script. It's not necessary. We get it. And I like that Justified does that. So, then we cut to the Mafia jackasses. One of whom is a combination of a complete moron and a racist jackass. And I love how they actually open. His first line of dialogue is about him talking about something I'm not going to say out loud. Just throwing racial slurs out there. It also is an interesting bit of exposition. We hear more about this later, that he's the local guy. But even his first few bits of dialogue indicate that he's the local guy. And the other guy, therefore, by definition, is not the local guy. And yeah, this guy is like the inverse of Dewey. That's a good way to put that. Because Dewey was lovable and amusing. This guy is aggravating and awful. It's okay. He dies. Spoilers. But this is when the character dynamic really starts to work for me. Raylan and Rachel bounce off of each other several times in this episode. Not to the point of melodrama. Just the fact that... It's just the fact that Raylan is so used to taking point. It's kind of his shtick. It's that power dynamic thing we talked about all the way back in the first episode. He enjoys dominating a scenario, right? That sounds bad, but you know what I mean. He enjoys being completely in charge of a situation, just like, oh God, I can't think of his name. Boyd also enjoyed. So he kind of naturally takes point, is how they keep referring to it in this episode. But then she popped in. Okay, so I'm not going to answer off-topic questions right now. I am aware of it. It's way too early to talk about it. The internet is always at risk. That's nothing new. I'm not saying to not freak out over Sub-Zero. I'm just saying the internet is literally always at risk and always has been for the past 10 years. It's been a continuous and non-stop struggle to make sure the internet continues to operate as it does. And that's all I have to say about that. So Rachel, obviously, is being given point on this situation. No explanation given, except we kind of infer the explanation because Raylan has been point in every single one of these things. And so, of course, the chief is like, yeah, I'm giving it to her. Why? Well, the unspoken answer is because Raylan's been on point for all of these, and he's new. And there is such a thing as, the totem pole, as they call it, the seniority problem, which is a problem. Let's not get into that off topic right now. But it is a thing. And it is a thing that it makes sense to try and push Rachel to the front. But naturally, Raylan immediately takes point without even... And you can tell he's not doing it on purpose. He just kind of does it. And then he's like, oh, no, hang on. Let me hold back a bit. But then we have a couple of other interesting bouncing character dynamics. Obviously, there's the Mafia goon and the local goon who bounce off of each other in a very negative way. There's Rachel and Raylan who bounce off each other in kind of a neutral way. And this is the really interesting one. Roland and Mindy bounce off of each other as well. But both of those, like, the episode feels like it's leaning towards Roland blowing up at her or her betraying him. But that never happens. Neither of those happen. And that's surprisingly mature writing. And you know why? How many of you can name someone that you love very much that you've had an argument with? Bonus question. Did that argument cancel your friendship or relationship with that person? I hate to quote My Little Pony. That's not true. I love quoting My Little Pony. But it's not really a friendship if one argument kills it. And so through their cantankerousness, through the fact that they're bouncing off each other, we actually see how close these two people really are. That what they've got going on is real. And that is something that's proved throughout the course of the episode. That he is legitimately loyal to her. That at no point in time is he willing to have anything happen to her in a negative stint as a result of this. And vice versa. She never betrays him. The woman who was the mother of the daughter he was doing free dental work for years, betrays him instantly. First time he said, I can't help you. And then shortly thereafter, she calls the police. Immediately betrays him. The guy who was like, yeah, no, I'll help you out. Can't help you out anymore. Sorry. And I'm not even talking about the guy trying to cross him across the border. But she never even considers betraying him. I'm still building up to a point here, if it's not obvious. So, Raylan goes to talk to the older gentleman. Very respectful. May I sit? And he waits for a response, too. He doesn't do that thing. Some of you have probably seen this. You may have seen this in real life. Can I sit? And they're already sitting down, not waiting for an answer. They're just being polite, a.k.a. being a dick. But he is actually polite. May I sit? Gets the confirmation. Then he sits down, pauses for a moment, gathers his thoughts, and says, the absolute truth. There are bad people after him. I am after him, too. I am going to try and save their lives. And just lays that out with total sincerity. And you could tell it got to the guy. Props to the actor who plays the old man. He only has like 3 lines of dialogue, but he does some good stuff with his posture and his face. Because you could tell he's just like, oh, okay. Got it. Then Raylan goes, and of course Raylan has a brain. He's already figured out that the mafia is after him. He's already figured they keep calling them bad guys. You notice they don't use the word mafia once. They use the word cartel once. Or twice, excuse me. But they don't use the word mafia. Instead, there's the bad guys. So Raylan goes into the backseat of the bad guys. It's like, hi. There's a couple ways this can go. It's almost the same power move we saw back in the beginning. It's just laying it out. Like, all right, this is how this is going to go. And if I see you again, I'll kill you. Cool. Peace. Walks out. Now, this next scene, they go out. Here, let's get the food and the water. Start crossing the border. Cool. No, it's a good method, Jesse Ward. It's a good power move. It continues to be cool. Just casually get in the backseat. Hi. So then we have the duel. There's actually only one real duel in this episode. And it is the one where the goon, who's Frank, I actually wrote down his name, Frank, and the actual mafia guy get out. Now, both of the criminals get out with their guns already drawn. Point 1. Now, I mentioned that because that, you'll notice, it's even visible in the episode, that fundamentally changes the dynamics of the duel. In most duels, in every duel we've seen to date, actually, the gun hasn't been in a in-hand drawn state. So Raylan's already working at a disadvantage. You'll notice he unholsters and unbuttons and is ready to draw at a moment's notice because of the threat that is immediately facing him. And he keeps telling him, don't walk forward, don't walk forward, don't get any closer. And if you're wondering why, there's actually a legal thing here. If this is going to sound like a really strange thing. So let's say you walk up to a cop with a gun in your hand. They have the legal recourse to shoot you. Now, that varies a little bit, and that could be debated in the courts. But the point is, that could be perceived as a threatening measure, yada, 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 right? There's a whole thing that goes into that. But the catch is, what you're actually supposed to do is you're supposed to give them the warning. Now, legally, you're only required to give them the one warning. Raylan gives them two. You know, toss it down. Because the thing is, what was discovered when those laws were written here in the States is that most people don't really understand what drawing a gun on a cop means. And I know that sounds strange, but you probably get what I mean by that. When things get real, the formulas change, the field changes. And some people are like, yeah, no, I got a gun, I'm cool. But the thing is, that person over there has probably spent time training on a range, is definitely trained in terms of reflexes, and may or may not actually have the muscle memory necessary to not shoot you on sight. So the idea is, give them that one warning. Throw it down. Be serious about it. Some people take it, some people don't. These two don't take it. Neither of them, actually. However, the way they don't take it is similar. Or sorry, completely different. And that's what I find funny. So, the Mafia goon, he goes to pull. He gets shot in a non-lethal status. I'm sure you caught that. Frank pretends to drop down his gun and then goes for the shot, which is, of course, the stupidest possible thing he could do. And, of course, gets shot right in the heart and is killed. And screw him, while I'm on the subject. But I bring that up because this scene arguably is the other encapsulation of the main theme of the episode. Now, I bet you're thinking, you're about to talk about the racism lore. No, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. No, I'm just joking. I am going to talk about the racism, because there's a lot of racism in this episode. But, honestly, and this is going to sound strange, I don't think that's the actual focus, and I know it's not the actual theme. Racism, in many ways, as is portrayed in this episode at least, because there's actually obviously gradients here, is at its core fundament a lack of respect. You don't see the other person as someone worth considering, or you don't see them as a person, or you don't see them as themselves. You break them down into a concept, and then you look down on that concept. It is a layered aspect of lack of respect. This episode is all about respect. We see it with the scene I mentioned earlier. I bet that when Roland actually mentioned, "Thank you for your service to the country," he meant that with total sincerity. Later on, the vet has no respect whatsoever for the two cops who are pulling him over. And interestingly enough, vice versa. There's also several examples, and it's even distrayed. They pull up the one guy, the black cop, and I hate to single that out, but the reason I single that out is because he specifically, it loses respect for the vet the moment the vet is a dick to him. The vet then decides to be a dick back to him because he's black. And it's just, okay. And it just kind of circles a little bit there. The two have absolutely no respect for each other at that point. We see this between Rachel and Rayland. We see this between the Mafia goon and the local goon. We see this between Roland and Mindy. And, of course, I already mentioned the scene earlier where Rayland treated the older gentleman with respect. And, of course, this also goes into how Rayland and the Mafia goon treat each other, because there is a weird amount of respect there. Oh, sure, the Mafia goon was going to kill him, and that's the job, but that doesn't mean he doesn't respect him. And, in fact, when Rayland goes for the non-lethal shot, you'll notice that one of the first things the goon does is toss his gun. Now, that may sound like a weird thing to point out, but if he had held onto this gun, he would have been shot to death. Like, he would have been killed. He was smart enough to recognize what happened, and within seconds was like, okay, gun gone, let it go. The game's been played, you win. He even volunteers the information about the sniper. because of respect. This then leads immediately into the next scene where the guy getting him across the border decides to change the deal because he has absolutely no respect for them. And this is probably the scene which really encapsulates the relationship between Mindy and Roland best. So the guy's going to go rape her. Let's just get that out of the way. Let's get that ugliness out of the way. And he stabs Roland in the gut, which is not a great place to be stabbed. And then Roland kills him. This is a weird... I can't believe I'm praising this as much as I am, because it's a really dirty, ugly scene in many ways. But it's really well done. Like the whole sequence. I've decided to up the... pay here. Okay. Sure, fine, whatever. I'll pay. Oh, I'm also changing the price. What happened there was he pushed and they gave. So he decides to push again. Because really, the guy kind of has all the cards there, and he recognizes that. So he pushes again, and they're like, dude, I literally don't have the money. Oh, I'll just take it out on her. They never say that outright, by the way. Credit to them. But it's very clear what is being meant by this. I'm going to get my $2,500 out of her. That's messed up. And she, and I mean no offense to her whatsoever this, but he can tell she is not the kind of person who is capable of defending herself in this situation, aka easy prey. Now, that's important, because now we've got not only the lack of respect there, but he portrays that lack of respect onto the other guy. Alan Ruck doesn't look like anything. No offense to Alan Ruck, he looks better than I do. But the point is, you don't look at him and think, that's a threat. You think, it's some pretty boy who's on the run because of some white-collar crime. So again, no respect. So he guts the guy briefly. Notice he doesn't even try to finish the job. I mention that because if there was a degree of respect for the competency of Roland, he would have actually killed him. Instead, he just guts him and moves on because he's not worth his time. Roland then grabs a rock and beats him over the head until he is dead. Now, all of this has been a great scene, but then it actually gets better. Roland, who just killed a guy who was in self-defense, who has just killed a guy in very clear self-defense. This isn't one of those gray areas. This isn't one of those maybe, maybe not, it was a squirt gun. This guy has just stabbed him in the stomach and was going to rape her. There's no uncertainty here. And in a very clear self-defense scene, when defending both himself and her, he freaks out. Of course he does. He's not a criminal. I have a feeling this is going to be a recurring trend for this show. It's already come up several times. We talked about it last week, too. He is someone who breaks the law? Absolutely. He is someone who is complicit in terrible crimes? Absolutely. But is he a criminal? No. And this scene finally answers that question that I mentioned way back at the beginning of the episode. Is Roland of a criminal mindset? And the answer is absolutely not. Not only does he freak out over this, but his immediate thought is for her safety. Not for himself. Not for the fact that he's probably bleeding out. For her. Get away from me. Get the life you need. I can't believe this is all awful. Blah, 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 blah. He's freaking out proper. This is also when we see that Mindy is in it for the long haul. Despite everything that's happened, she has his back still. Great moment. So then they keep going, and he goes over the ledge to look at his wound because he doesn't want her to see how badly he has been wounded. And there's a little moment which I love. So Raylan is caught up to them, and she sees Raylan coming. Her immediate response, oh, thank God. First reaction to seeing a marshal when they're on the run is, oh, thank God. That says a lot, doesn't it? And what I love about this sequence, this scene right here, is it's so wonderfully low-key, right? Hey, man, it's cool. You want to hear about why I did it? Yeah, I'll hear why you did it. It's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And they're just kind of chatting. Well, there's a sniper over on the right. I wish we'd seen more of this. I know it's not going to happen because Roland dies, but Alan Ruck and Timothy Oliphant have amazing chemistry together. They only have 2 scenes together in the entire episode. One's on the phone, and one's right here, and both of them are gold. So maybe I don't know. They're going to make me be a Walmart greeter. I don't want to be a Walmart greeter. You know how it is. And they're just bouncing off each other. I love it. But what I love most about this is this once again ties back into that respect theme. The two obviously have a great deal of respect for each other. Raylan is there to save their lives. He was being honest earlier. And the two orbit each other in an interesting yin-yang kind of a way. Because one of them was a criminal who wanted to walk over the line, and one of them was a cop who walks over the line. But then Raleigh, let's call it what it is, commits suicide. Now, he doesn't do it because he wants to die. It's actually probably better to describe what he does as a heroic sacrifice. He knows, and he's right, that if he goes ahead and gets himself killed, this situation has been dissolved. Okay, we're good. Sniper's gonna run off, and he does. And she can live, Raylan can live, and we're good. Now, that's not... I hesitate to say that's the correct call. What I am instead going to say is that in the moment, that was the safest call Roland could have made. It was the most highest chance of success call he could have made under the circumstances. He was already injured and bleeding out, and there may or may not be help coming in time. He was reasonably certain that the professional killer was going to go ahead and bail once the kill was done, because they haven't made the guy yet. And that's the end of that. He could have tried to dig it out. You know, Raylan's a good shot. They could have tried and outmaneuver them or whatever. There's lots of different ways they could have tried to go in other directions tactically, but all of those were a throw of the dice. His call was the one that was, yeah, okay, I'll bet on red. So he did. And lo and behold, the professional was a professional. Gets him right here. Shunk. He's dead, probably inside of a minute. It's a damn shame, because I really think they could have done a lot with that. And I think that in a better world, Raleigh would have actually been a pretty good guy. As is, Mindy's going to have to go into witness protection now, and hopefully get a whole lot of therapy, which of course she will not get, because this is not the extant. This is real life. On the plus side, Rachel does look good in the hat. No, I caught that, Jesse Ward. He was going to keep trying to help people. Keep trying to work on kids' teeth. We need to reset the board a little bit here. I think Rachel looked good in the hat. Oh yeah, no, don't worry. Garrus lived, obviously. He went on to have a long and fulfilling life of being a jackass. So, how do we rate this one? I suppose I'll mention, since we're still kind of new at this, for those of you not familiar with the system, we've got purple at the top, red, orange, yellow, which is average, green, blue, and then black, which is lamentation. I definitely think, in this case, I would say orange is probably the floor. This is definitely an above average episode. I'm actually kind of torn between orange and red. There are some structural problems with the episode I didn't really talk about. And there's some construction oddities, and some of the pacing is very strange. Obviously, the acting is phenomenal, and the central theme is very well executed. The dialogue just pops. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. I'm actually still kind of torn on this. I mean, yeah, that's the idea. For those of you unfamiliar with the system, the idea is that this is comparing across all of fiction, all of television, not just Justified. Ironically, if we some of these scores would change drastically if we were just looking at Justified as is, because that would make Fire in the Hole like a purple so far, and then Riverbrook would be, you know, like I guess. God, I'm trying to think how to explain that, because that would probably be like a yellow at that point, and then Fixer would be a blue for Justified, right? Completely changes that. I feel like I'm gonna go with my gut on this. I'm gonna give this an orange. I will admit it's certainly very debatable between the two, but it is absolutely above average regardless. That's how I think I'm gonna land on that one. At this point, and I hate to sound strange, I'm curious if this show, because we're just covering the first season, will have any purples. Because for those of you not familiar with the system, you need a little bit extra. There needs to be that extra bit of oomph to go either all the way at the bottom or all the way at the top. And I'm not sure if we're going to get that in this show. I have a feeling we're not going to get below a yellow, though. So that's some really consistent television. Either way. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and chop off the local recording.